Yo, what up, you guys? It's Market Scraper. So today was a pretty interesting day in the stock market. We're talking about Tesla stock, Palantir stock, and the overall stock market. And also, I'm going to talk about a trade that I made today. And it's an interesting trade. And so stay tuned to the end to hear about the trade that I made today. But before we get into this video, if you get any value from this content, don't forget to put a smash down on that like button. It really helps this content, helps other people see this video. And if you haven't already, consider hitting the subscribe button. It's free to do, and I'd really appreciate it. And if you're into cryptocurrencies, don't forget to go to the link in the description down below. I'm a partner with BlockFi and get up to 250 in crypto bonus. And in addition, they have an 8.6% APY with simply stable coins that track the US dollar. So this is pretty interesting. And down here is where the structure is in terms of what you put in and how much you can get in a BTC bonus. Okay, so we have Tesla stock over here. Interestingly enough, as you guys know and remember, we talked about this important ascending triangle, and we talked about that on the first, this day here. So we didn't even have a hit to the top of this triangle yet, and yet we were talking about this ascending triangle back here, and we had a third hit to the bottom. So we want to be cognizant of the more hits you do on a pattern, the likely you can break through that pattern. It does look like this is going to actually hold. We had a pretty bullish day in terms of we went pretty far down, but recovered nicely. So if we end up going to the upside, we can see this here that we basically are trading in this pattern here, and we went to the downside here. So it wouldn't be so surprising for us to eventually make our way to the upside, hitting this point right over here, basically somewhere along the top of this. And this top corresponds to $780, and then finally breaking to the upside. And this is kind of our bias. It's been our bias. We've been talking about that we think that we would probably hit the bottom of this trend line at some point. That was kind of what we thought what was going to happen. We thought that earnings might take us a little higher, and then eventually we would break to the downside before eventually finally breaking out of this ascending triangle pattern. That is our bias. That doesn't mean we're not going to break to the downside. We simply have a bias that we're going to break out to the upside. And if we break down to the downside, you guys can see my previous videos of my targets down below there. But overall, we're looking at a pretty significant day. And also, we went down here to do the deed, to touch this line down here. So that was pretty cool. Also, with Palantir stock, we can see some similar things that happened here. Keep in mind, with Palantir stock specifically, we talked about this line right here. If we cross this line, we would go from being bullish to bearish. And for good reason, we had some significant downside following a breakdown from this line right here. We opened right below this line and continued to go below it. Now, I also sent out a stock tweet post saying that this right here, this line, I expect to see support here and close above it, and we ended up closing above this line right here. So this is interesting, and this is pretty bullish here, that fact that we didn't close below it. That would be pretty bearish if we close below this line here. So now I think I'm personally thinking that now that we had our bearishness here, we went bearish to the downside, now I'm being a little bit bullish to go to the upside. We'll see if that plays out. Keep in mind that I would expect that this trend line here, that was once support, will continue now to act as resistance. So when we end up coming back up here, I think that we would have a candle that closed maybe right on this line here. We do have earnings coming up, so that's going to be pretty exciting. I think earnings is coming up on the 11th. So we have earnings right around here. And so this is the day where we decide whether we're going to break out to the upside and break out of this trend line essentially. So before the 11th, unless we have a pre-anticipatory run up to earnings, I expect us to trade below this line until earnings, and then we can see a breakout to the upside, or we can see a breakout finally to the downside. So this is pretty exciting. Let's look at the S&P 500. So we talked about this line as being extremely important. This line right here is our line in the sand where we turn from being bullish to bearish. So we kind of closed basically right on the line. And we can look at this in two different lights right now. We can look at this as this was a little bit bullish. We can look at this as this was a little bearish actually. So if we look at this and actually what happened here, we have the 20 period moving average coming in, and price is converging on this 20 period moving average, and the price of the S&P 500 likes to just come back to the 20 period moving average ever so often, especially after it gets overextended. So that's kind of what we were doing here. We were waiting and just trading flat and sideways for the 20 period moving average to catch up, touch the 20 period moving average, and then maybe be on our merry way to the upside and see our next leg to the upside. That's kind of my bias right now. This is also has to do with how we closed the day. We went massively and had a huge recovery at the end of the day. This is pretty bullish. We closed above the 20 period moving average. We could have closed below it, but we end up going above it. I don't know when we're going to exactly recover or if we're going to go back down and make new lows. But one thing that I do think, by looking at some previous price action in the past, I kind of think that over the next 1 or 2 candles that we see, I expect this gap here to basically be filled. And I'm not saying that price has to go to the upside. We could just fill the gap and then continue to go to the downside. So that's kind of what I think to happen in terms of like some insight of basically how price usually reacts and usually acts. As long as we open above this trend line here, there's no reason in my mind that we won't close this gap right here. So that's the insight that I will leave you guys on here. The situation obviously is a little bit ambiguous in my opinion here, but we have the bias that will go to the upside. Clearly, if we open up below this trend line and have resistance and can't get above this, we would switch to be bearish pretty quickly here because this again is the important line in the sand that we don't want to stay below for too long. It's okay, we have maybe 1 day below it, but if we have a closing weekly candle below this line, that's kind of game over to seeing significant downside. And this is not the scenario I think, but it does play out kind of interestingly in the sense that the bottom of this channel here is almost 4,000 and we can maybe dip a little bit below this or 400. So this would be not such a crazy thing to happen if we did go to the downside and end up going around this 400 zone, which we eventually think that maybe we'll retest in the future. Okay, now let's go to the trade of the day that I did today. So basically, this is Splunk. And I said in the stock twist message last night that Splunk is reaching this level here. Basically, we dip below this line. We dipped up below it here, below it over here, and I made this shape here basically showing how far maybe we could dip below this line basically. And this is kind of when buyers tend to step in. So let's see what I did today. So this is Splunk we're looking at right here. And we actually went below here, just kind of like we expected. We drew this circle right here, thinking that, yeah, we'll probably go below this line, just like we have in the past, and we did here. And I stepped in myself today and did a purchase. I stepped in, let's look at the price right over here. I have an average cost of $118.78, and I picked up 100 shares. And I don't talk about usually how much I pick up, but I often pick up 100 shares, generally speaking, because I also like to sell covered calls. So to protect myself from the downside a little bit, I did instantly just turn around and sold a covered call. So this is interesting. Let's look at what I did here. I sold a covered call for the end of the week, so it expires on Friday. I collected $51 in premium, and this is a $124 strike. So basically, we're looking here that if maybe by Friday, so we're looking over here that the Friday, we're looking at the 1 week here. Let's look at the 1 day here. Okay, so each candle here is a single day. So on the 7th is the day that this expires. So as long as we don't see prices over 124, I will keep all of my shares and I will have also collected the $51. And so the $51 effectively makes my cost basis, instead of being in actuality $118.78 per share, my cost basis is almost like $118.27 because of the $51 I collected today. Now, here's the thing. If price by the 7th ends up going above $124, I will be called and my shares will be purchased. So this is a trade in the sense that I don't mind this going long. I don't mind holding these shares for the long term. However, if it happens to be on come Friday, I might get my position bought out. And what would that mean exactly? It would mean that basically all in all, I will get $51 from the call still, right, that I sold. And in addition, I will get $522. That's what I will get in profits. So $522 plus $51 is $573 $3. So if we go above $24 by Friday, I will have collected a profit of $573. And this is not such a bad deal. Now, I don't want it to happen, but if it does happen, I will collect a profit. And basically, what this is doing for me, it is also protecting me from basically the downside, because there's no telling that we could go even lower here and stay lower. So basically, I can collect money in the interim, even if we end up going lower, and I kind of lowered my cost basis in that way. Well, I hope you guys got some value from this content. I hope you guys thought that was interesting. If you haven't already, smash that like button, subscribe to this channel for more content like this, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. And keep in mind that none of this is financial advice. This is just some random guy on YouTube drawing some stick figure lines on a chart talking to you guys.